The finale of Jujutsu Kaisen was always going to be a difficult one to pull off. Ending any series is difficult because finding a balance or striking the correct nail to pin down how things should end in an author's eyes is a near impossible task. How do you end an epic tale like Dragon Ball, a series filled with emotional highs and lows like Naruto, or finish a series characterized by its strong points of life and death in Bleach? How do you end a series that has become the face of Shonen Jump during its run? Again, it's a nigh impossible question to answer because what do you prioritize as an author? The ending you wanted or the one fans think will be good? In the end, there's only one real answer. With respect to this question and its answer, the story at hand needs to be laid bare. JJK is a story composed of the many pieces of what a lot of shonen is and isn't. It has the action, grandiose set pieces, and all-powerful characters closely associated with a lot of popular shonen stories, but incorporates just as many seinen elements into its writing. The psychology of these characters, the politics found within its world, and the relationships of the people found within said world. The build-up for all these aspects turn this story into one ripe for dissection on a reviewer and analytical level, complementing this world with a power system that has pushed so many to speculate who could beat who in versus debates across the internet in many different corners of it. The sheer passion that has accumulated because of this franchise's fan base, thanks to the storytelling it's had over its run, could easily cement it amongst the greats within its genre. So I'll ask the question again. How do you end a manga that has become a face of its generation? Do you appeal to your wants as an author, or do you appeal to the fans? Although I said there was only one answer, it's a rather complicated one to get to. To formulate an answer to this question, the finale of this story needs to be cut into moment by moment, beginning with Sakuna and Gojo's conflict, as well as the power system that would come to be pushed to its limits in their battle. A personalized power system isn't anything new to shonen, with Hunter x Hunter and Bleach being the best examples of this. However, a power system that reflects what it means to be the strongest is quite telling. Without the innate talent of a good curse technique, you are easily seen as inferior to others. Sakuna and Gojo fulfill this idea perfectly as concepts themselves rather than characters per se. They certainly have personalities, but the utilization of them has been less than indicative of their station as characters within the narrative. These two have been used as scapegoats for the story to bring out and put away as things move along. Finger Bearer is too strong, Sakuna cleans up and gets stronger. Hanami starting to become too much for the students, Gojo appears. Too many transfingered humans, cursed spirits, and a rampaging Shikigami, here come the boys in red and blue to be the maintenance squad who are promptly sealed and not seen in full effect until the final arc. The two of them had become interchangeable red buttons to clear the board whenever too many pieces of varying degrees of power are at play to re-establish the status quo. This is why hidden inventory is an important part of Gojo's story. It's a story to make sense of why Gojo became who he is, that much true, but it's more so a story about who he was, before he was ever relegated to his current status as an emergency button for the story. A person that's been seeking something, looking for a way to fill the void made because of his failures as a guardian and friend. Being the strongest was always what made his character what it is at present, entangling him in this mess of whether his strength defines him or he defines his strength. His name holds weight. His existence changed the world. Nothing about his role in this story points to his character being more than strength, a character made utterly and truly in its image. Once he ascended the throne of the modern era, he lost the right to be human in a way. The solitude that came with that territory was a curse to him. No one could understand him, so he lived as a vessel to be the ultimate weapon, not by choice, but by obligation. All this is to set up his contrasting existence with Sakuna, a being whose identity has been nothing except strength. If he is not the pinnacle, he may as well be dead. If he loses, he may as well be dead. He's lived a life clawing his way to power from the womb to the Heian era to this day. His life has always been prevented in one way or another. Seizing Megumi's body makes him truly unstoppable, and just like clockwork, Gojo makes his reappearance in the story to balance the odds once more. This battle's outcome was definitely more anticipated by the fanbase than anyone in the actual story, but with that came a few red flags that may have dampened that anticipation. Themes, textual evidence, and the narrative all held up an ugly mirror to Gojo, which was his inevitable loss and subsequent death. Satoru Gojo lost his right to be human a long time ago. The story may have hinted at it, but this fight only confirmed it. The domain clashes made sense, and the constant back and forth made for unpredictable, tense moments. Gojo had become the greatest weapon against Sakuna. The way he constantly adapts to the changing state of the fight and continues to hit black flashes to restore his output and reverse curse technique illustrates the level of this fight very clearly. In this way, he parallels Maharaga, who itself is a perfect weapon against any sorcerer. He'd become a character made to serve two purposes by the end of this fight. One was being the perfect weapon, but the other is what sealed Gojo's fate, that being the role of succession in this story. Succession has been of great importance since the beginning of this story, starting with Yuta and Zero to Megumi in the main story and extending to encompass several other characters. Within this theme, many older characters have taken on successors through spiritual or intentional means. Gojo has Yuta and Megumi, Geto has his entire family, Yuki has Todo, and Toji has Maki. Each one had to fall so the next generation could rise from their ashes, forging a new age of sorcerers separated from the self-serving lifestyle they led. The whole of the Culling games also pushes this narrative as a new generation is taking on and defeating several older sorcerers who have probably trained for much more of their lives when it comes to high-stake battles. Outside of this theme, the planning that was set into motion on Sukuna's part was instrumental to Gojo's loss. His approach was calculated while Gojo is left to adapt. It makes sense why Gojo would be seen as stronger by a decent portion of the fan base because he had gotten no type of buff to his techniques or arsenal except for his adjustment to his barrier technique. All of this played into the fraudulent claims plaguing Sukuna's image that are still around to this day and something I myself used to agree with. Upon a few rereads though, something became apparent after reading the Reggie vs Megumi fight. This line right here. A sorcerer is nothing but a con artist. How this line applies to the fight at present is seen in Mahoraga as the X factor of it. The audience, in-universe spectators, and Gojo alike saw exactly what role it would serve. To adapt to infinity for Sukuna to use it as a route to his victory, outside of domain amplification that allowed for a brief break from the limitless. Everyone was completely deceived in how Mahoraga would ultimately play into this fight though. The believed con was Mahoraga's adaptation would be the only way for Sukuna to bypass the limitless, but the point of skill adaptation on Sukuna's part foreshadowed Sukuna's eventual victory as well as the moment when Mahoraga launched his space-cutting slash. Gojo, spectators, the audience. All of us needed to be confident in Gojo's victory for this shakeup to be so effective. In hindsight, it deserves more credit than many will give it because it's built up throughout the fight with two key moments highlighting the ability to replicate difficult feats on Sukuna's part. He's a monster, and if his battle with Gojo wasn't enough to satisfy the title, his battle against the rest of the heroes will. But sending off Gojo with just his death couldn't be so simple. As a living weapon for a majority of his story, his humanity became muddled. The playful, blunt character he showed himself to be seemed to disguise the pain he endured after losing Geto, but made for a friendly face to new students coming into the field of sorcery. He was trying to be who he once was despite having lost so much in his time, so returning to his body and time when he could feel the most alive was fitting. His admittance of Sukuna's power and unseen arsenal allude to what would come next in his two-part battle. The power aspect could be alluding to his deception, which led to his victory, but what was most certainly recognized was his Heian era form. After all, with how the Six Eyes works, they definitely could have recognized that Sukuna had some sort of trump card. Furthermore, the point of Gojo being grateful to have died on the field of battle is a telling moment that he wasn't alone and that his fellow strongest did in fact exist. This works in tandem with Nanami saying Gojo used sorcery just for himself, which is somewhat true. From his early years, he didn't care about regular people. Protecting them was a waste of time and energy to him. He grew to have a distorted way of protecting them after Geto died, but that's it. Supporting this was how happy he was to have had fun. He didn't worry so much about the people he left behind to fight Sukuna, only the things he left undone. Gojo is a selfish person who did selfless things. He did develop ideas for the future, but they were guided by what he wanted. Killing the higher-ups, developing a group of intelligent, powerful sorcerers, even fighting Sukuna if you look at it from the perspective of him having fun. All of it culminates in him trying to fulfill his aspirations. So being talked down to by the people who knew what he was cruel upon first read-through, makes sense on the second with a clear head, and deserved on the third. In the end, Satoru Gojo is a character who went from childish teen to weaponized adult, who was swallowed whole by his selfish nature, power, and complicated moral compass. He's failed quite a lot in his life when it mattered, and failed in his final battle as well. Moreover, he continued to indulge his selfish side a little bit even in death, leaving behind a monster for this upcoming generation of sorcerers to use for growth and development. Before that though, the last relevant ancient sorcerer needed to be made an example of. Hajime Kosimo is definitely a character who received more hype from the community than the story gave him. He's been a mystery since his introduction because of his curse technique and still feeling engaged against Sukuna while fighting Gojo, leading to some speculation regarding his scaling to Sukuna when he would activate his curse technique. Ultimately though, he would become a warm-up used to fill out the love narrative Yorozu introduced, show what Kamitoke does, reveal Sakuna's incarnation, use a suicide curse technique, and become fishing bait. Wasted potential is a term thrown around regarding his character, and an opinion I still believe, as he served no real purpose and the wait was not worth it. Kosimo wasn't gone too soon or too late, but rather he was utilized poorly. Had he paired up with everyone in the raid, he could have made for quite the key player, but he goes down as a character that continued his old traditions of a faithful one-on-one battle against the wrong opponent. After this, the real battle begins, and the stakes have never been higher. Sukuna must be slain tonight. He's able to fight and chant at the same time, and his technique has been developed in a new terrifying direction. Without Gojo, things are far more desperate than they ever were before, except the hope of him coming back is now impossible. It's now or never. No more wondering whether Yuta or Hikari could come to shift the tides. All chips are down, and every contingency plan must be put into action. Higuruma's judgment is the first to hit Sukuna, and for the levels of chance that factored into this plan, it was obvious it wouldn't work. Higuruma is an infant when it comes to battles that deal in such high stakes, and he'd been seeking some sort of punishment. So this is where he was destined to fall. This plan also saw the purest MacGuffin, I hope I'm using that right, in Kamitoke, the cursed tool that was introduced to invalidate Higuruma's domain completely by becoming the target for confiscation. This is easily the most annoying part of this fight because the cursed tool is strictly there to make the fight go as it did. It makes one wonder what if Yorozu never wanted to give Sukuna a cursed tool and was simply satisfied with dying by his hand. The weapon does nothing except serve this singular purpose, and I hate it. Kamitoke is the real MVP of this fight. Running parallel to this battle is the back and forth between Kenjaku and Takaba. This fight is exceedingly lackluster, but also extremely perfect for Kenjaku. It's lackluster because it's a background event for Sukuna who wouldn't even be here without him, and he doesn't care all that much when he dies so close to his dream. It's perfect because it shines this light on the impossibility of dreams for stardom, because you may not be enough for that dream. In this way, Takaba and Kenjaku reflect one another because both could not attain what they truly wanted. However, where Kenjaku was obsessed and wanted more, Takaba came to understand that the dream had to come to an end and reality must set in at one point or another. As their dreams slip through their fingers, Takaba goes out without ever having proved much, while Kenjaku dies lost in a fantasy. Albeit underwhelming in its importance, Kenjaku's death comes with confirmation of Toji's theory, Yuta fulfilling his goal, and being punished by his own selfish action. The last point is crucial as self-service has punished Higuruma, Kosimo, Gojo, and Kenjaku to this point, so he follows suit with the prelude to it being his domain expansion. Aside from the sheer spectacle of this fight, having the two main characters fight the strongest sorcerer alive demonstrates the best the post-Gojo era has to offer. The theory crafting that went into the first plan, while meant to be more devastating, worked to simplify the playing field. Yuta's domain limits Sukuna's options further and ensnares him completely. Yuji's soul punches creates an extra element of pressure that no one else could do, giving him the role he needed to be relevant for the final battle. The break in this plan was misjudging Megami's mental state and Yuta's hubris but necessity to take out Kenjaku. Although the backup plan for the eventuality of Yuta's defeat was smart, it leads to a true test for Maki that does more for Sukuna than the heroes. The call out of sorcery versus the natural by his potential fits Sukuna well because of his aptitude for sorcery and his body that boosts the effects of his jujutsu. The peak of sorcery facing the peak of human physical strength makes for a great fight on paper, but a short-lived one-on-one affair once the Black Flash comes into play, leaving only one to fend off this monster. As stated earlier in the story, a sorcerer's technique does determine 80% of their potential, so needless to say, Sakuna and Gojo would make for the strongest considering their techniques and self-serving mentalities which led to the people they would become. These were two factors determined by an older age of sorcerers, but as would be shown, possessing an amazing technique and being a selfish individual does not make a great sorcerer. Kusakabe and Ino have proven themselves capable of being great sorcerers by tangling with a monster like Sukuna. Their short time in the spotlight serves to flesh out this movement away from older thinking and predetermination of a sorcerer's potential. All of this would culminate in Yuji's awakening, as he has been counted out by most readers and the story alike, as his technique finally makes itself known. To be Sukuna's amateurish reflection and related to him through the soul makes for a moment far more cruel than it feels otherwise. Yuji has always been fated to house Sukuna, for his body to be taken over by him and their connection to be defined through continuous conflict. They disagreed with one another on a mental and emotional level, leading to a change for both. While opposed in every way, the fact their curse technique is what links them reinforces a level of disgust for Sukuna. The technique he has mastered is now imitated by the person he hates most in this world. Therefore, he had to bring Yuji to his limit and break him. However, Yuji only feels a small piece of that despair because he's grown since that fateful Halloween night, and Toto would be there to ensure he stood upright to face this monster head to head in confidence. The allusions to the Shibuya incident have permeated throughout this arc, from its initial stakes going into the second half, to Yuji's solo battle against the central antagonist, Kenjaku's small involvement, and Toto's appearance when all hope seems lost. To that end, these similarities have come to their separate conclusions. Gojo and Kenjaku have died, Yuji maintains his mental fortitude, and Toto has developed his curse technique to an even greater degree. These aspects don't bog down the story, rather they bolster it by establishing a strong sense of change since the arc which concluded the first half of the story, and the battle between these three would leave no room for error or rest for a single moment like with Mahito. Things are different now. No need for words, only tactics that will reveal who deserves to win this fight. From binding vows to grade A deception, anything is on the table for this victory. Gojo is undoubtedly a weapon that could give the heroes the edge they need to win this fight, yes, but at what cost? Simple remedies for this moment are: don't have Sakuna use domain expansion, but then Yuji would kill Sakuna too fast. Don't have Sakuna misjudge the switch, but Yuji would have probably died. The trickle-down effect of changing this interaction is important and is meant to tell from an outsider's perspective how difficult a technique Gojo had perfected. Yuta, the prodigy of the modern era, couldn't master any part of Gojo's technique or understand why he had to use Hollow Purple in the way that he did. This is used to empathize with Gojo's plight and responsibility as the strongest, but that time has long since passed. Yuta is down for the count. Yuji and Toto are left to execute the last plan up their sleeve, but it doesn't pull through. Angel's lost arm messing with her technique links to now Vito's technique being disrupted for the same reason. If damaging someone to the point their domain collapses can happen, then a damaged body can cause the techniques to be less potent. Although it can be within that damaged state, when everything is stacked against you, that you can rise to power. So Yuji Itadori does. Yuji's domain being a serene place from his past devoid of any human life is reflective of his peace. The life he left a long time ago, but a sign of what brought him to where he'd be today. Inside of a world where being normal, where being sane is impossible for many, he maintains that beauty in his domain. He's never given up his right to live as a human, despite what he might say. Humanity is not a simple ask of normalcy. It is an ask of a myriad of emotions. It is an ask of understanding and sympathy. Two emotions that insult Sakuna. To live subjugated by Yuji is worse than death. It is an admission of defeat, an admission of inferiority. So Sakuna chooses to kill rather than be killed. What he didn't account for, though, was the power of the people closest to Yuji. Megumi and Nobara's reawakenings are rocky roads for sure. In Nobara's case, her fate was deliberately left ambiguous, but there's no build-up to her comeback. Megumi's case falls into a similar pit with poor build-up. Going from giving up to fighting back after one heartfelt conversation is way too small a build-up to his eventual awakening. Although this does contrast the end of the Shibuya incident by showing that Yuji will never be alone, which is a fine message, it has a very dull execution. Nobara awakens 30 minutes before Sakuna was about to open his domain on the dot. It's all too rushed to be satisfying, nullifying its otherwise strong messaging, all of which is made more murky thanks to Yuji extending an olive branch to Sakuna on his deathbed. After all he's done, after all the people he's killed, it would be impossible for everyone to simply accept that he still exists when they sacrificed all that they did. Mercy is not for everyone. Redemption is not for everyone. Sakuna of all people does not deserve those things, and he makes it clear. Despite the messy way this arc comes to its conclusion, it still provides a very human one at the end of a very long and grueling battle. So that brings us back to the central question. For one final time, how do you end a manga that has become the face of a generation? Rushed or not? Good or not? You give the audience an ending where the main players return to the story together with their scars visible. Years for us, months for them. Have them smile. Whether this is the end Akutami wanted or the one he thought fans would like isn't up for me to decide, and it never will be. Only bear witness to the end of this long and winding tale. I'll be making a follow-up video to this when the final 3 chapters of this story comes out, but until then, I want to thank you all so much for watching. Please stay safe out there and have yourselves a damn good one. I'll see you all next time.